I was 28 years old the first time I understood what it meant to be truly seen by another person, and it happened on a Tuesday night in November when the fog rolled in so thick you could barely see 3 feet in front of your headlights. I'd been working late at the architecture firm downtown, nothing unusual, just another evening of tweaking renderings and responding to client emails that probably could have waited until morning. But that's who I was back then, someone who buried himself in work to avoid the uncomfortable questions that kept surfacing whenever I had too much quiet time alone with my thoughts. The drive home from downtown Seattle to my apartment in Capitol Hill usually took about 20 minutes, but that night everything moved at a crawl. The fog had transformed familiar streets into something alien and dreamlike, and I found myself gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary, leaning forward as if those extra few inches would help me see better through the gray wall surrounding my car. My phone sat in the cup holder, silent. No texts from friends asking about weekend plans, no dating app notifications, just the quiet hum of my engine and the periodic swish of my wipers clearing moisture from the windshield. That's when I first noticed the headlights behind me. Not tailgating, not aggressive, just there, steady, following at a safe distance as I navigated the slow crawl through the fog. At first I didn't think much of it. We were probably heading in the same direction, both of us just trying to get home safely. But block after block, turn after turn, those headlights remained. When I slowed down, they slowed down. When I sped up slightly, they matched my pace. My heart started doing this thing it does when I'm nervous, this quick flutter that makes my breath catch. I told myself I was being paranoid. This was Seattle, not some horror movie. People lived in the same neighborhoods. Of course, someone might be taking the same route. But then I turned onto a side street, one that wasn't a main thoroughfare, and the headlights turned too. My palms started to sweat against the steering wheel. I made another turn, this one definitely out of the way, adding time to my route home. The headlights followed. My mind raced through possibilities, most of them not good. Should I drive to a police station? Should I call someone? But who would I call? My parents lived 3 states away, and I'd let most of my friendships fade into occasional social media likes and birthday texts. The truth was, I'd been isolating myself for months, maybe longer, telling myself I was just busy with work when really I was avoiding the harder truth that I didn't know how to be myself around other people anymore. I was about 6 blocks from my apartment when I decided to just go home. If this person was following me, at least my building had security cameras. At least there were neighbors who might hear if something went wrong. The logical part of my brain knew I was probably overreacting, but the anxious part that had been running my life for the past year was in full control now. I turned onto my street, a quiet residential block lined with old maples that looked like ghost sentinels in the fog. My building was halfway down, a renovated brick walk-up with a small parking area in back. My designated spot was right near the entrance to the building, under a streetlight that cast a weak yellow glow through the mist. As I approached my driveway, my hands were shaking. I put on my turn signal, slowing down to make the turn into my spot. That's when it happened. The car behind me, the one that had been following me for the past 15 minutes, flashed its lights, just once, a single, quick flash of high beams. And then, instead of following me into the parking area or pulling up beside me or doing any of the threatening things I'd been imagining, the car simply continued down the street. It drove past my building and disappeared into the fog, its taillights fading to nothing within seconds. I sat in my car for a long time after I'd parked, engine off, the hands still gripping the wheel. My heart was pounding, but now for a different reason. That flash of lights, it hadn't felt threatening. It had felt like something else entirely, like a message, like someone saying, "I see you. I see where you live. I see you made it home safely. And now, I'm leaving." I walked up to my apartment in a daze, my mind replaying those 15 minutes over and over. I made myself dinner, microwaved leftovers I barely tasted. I tried to watch TV but couldn't focus. I kept thinking about those headlights, that single flash, the strange gentleness of how the car had simply driven away. It felt like the beginning of something, though I had no idea what. The next morning, I convinced myself I'd imagined the significance of it all. Coincidence, random chance, someone who just happened to be going the same direction. I know I went to work, sat through meetings about a new mixed-use development project, ate lunch at my desk. But that evening, as I packed up to leave, I felt a flutter of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. What if the fog came again? What if those headlights appeared in my rearview mirror? The weather was clear that night. I drove home under a sky full of stars and no one followed me. I felt a strange disappointment that I didn't want to examine too closely. Thursday was the same. Friday, too. The weekend passed in the usual blur of grocery shopping and laundry and avoiding phone calls from my mom. By Monday, I'd almost forgotten about it. Almost. But Monday night, the fog came back, thicker than before, rolling in from the sound like something alive. I stayed late at work again, not because I had to, but because something pulled me to leave at the same time I had the previous week. Same route, same slow crawl through the gray evening, and there they were. The headlights, appearing behind me about 3 blocks from my office, settling into that same careful following distance. My heart jumped into my throat, but this time the fear was mixed with something else. Excitement, curiosity, a strange sense of being part of something I didn't understand but desperately wanted to. I drove my normal route this time, no evasive turns, no panic. Just the steady progress toward home with those headlights behind me like a promise. And when I reached my driveway, when I put on my turn signal and began to slow down, it happened again. One flash of the high beams. Then the car continued past, dissolving into the fog. And this time I didn't sit in my car processing. I jumped out and ran to the edge of the street, trying to catch a glimpse of the vehicle, trying to see a license plate or make out what kind of car it was. But the fog was too thick, and they were already gone. All I knew was that it was a sedan, dark-colored, maybe black or dark blue, and that someone inside it was paying attention to me in a way no one had in a very long time. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with questions. Who was this person? Why were they following me? What did they want? And underneath all those questions was another one, quieter but more insistent. Why did I want them to keep doing it? I started leaving work at the same time every night, hoping for fog. Tuesday was clear. Wednesday brought rain but no fog. Thursday. The fog came in patchy, not thick enough apparently, because the headlights didn't appear. I felt their absence like a physical thing, a disappointment that settled in my chest and made the drive home feel longer and lonelier than it ever had before. Friday, I stayed late on purpose, working until almost 9. When I finally left, the fog was so dense I could barely see the hood of my car. And there they were, right on schedule, falling into position behind me like we'd rehearsed this dance 100 times. But this time was different. This time, about halfway home, the car pulled up beside me at a red light. We were the only 2 vehicles on the road, stopped at an intersection where the streetlight created a small island of visibility in the fog. I turned my head slowly, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. The driver was a man, maybe early 30s, with dark hair and the kind of face that would be easy to overlook in a crowd except for his eyes. Even through 2 car windows in the fog, I could see his eyes. They were looking right at me with an intensity that made my whole body flush hot. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just looked at me like he was memorizing every detail of my face. The light turned green, and he accelerated smoothly, falling back into position behind me. I drove the rest of the way home in a state of electric awareness. Every cell in my body felt alive, tuned to the presence of those headlights in my rearview mirror. When I reached my driveway, I slowed down more than necessary, giving him time to do something different, to break the pattern. But no. One flash of the lights. Then he was gone. I went upstairs and did something I hadn't done in over a year. I opened my laptop and pulled up the dating apps I had deleted months ago, not to reinstall them, just to look at the icons and remember what it felt like to want connection with another person. To remember that I was capable of desire, of hope, of taking risks with my heart. This stranger in the fog was waking something up in me that I'd tried very hard to put to sleep. The pattern continued for 3 more weeks. Every foggy night, the headlights would appear. Every time I'd drive home with this building sense of anticipation. Every time he'd flash his lights once at my driveway and disappear. And slowly, I started to change. I started leaving my apartment on weekends, going to coffee shops, walking through Pike Place Market, Deeks saying yes when coworkers invited me to happy hour. I started seeing a therapist, something I'd been avoiding for years, and in our second session, I finally said the words out loud, "I think I might be gay." She didn't look surprised. She asked me how it felt to say it. I told her it felt like I'd been holding my breath for 28 years and was finally allowing myself to exhale. We talked about fear and shame and all the ways I'd been making myself small to avoid confronting this truth. We talked about my mystery driver and what he represented, this person who saw me, who followed me home to make sure I was safe, who never demanded anything but seemed to be offering something precious, witness, attention, care. December came and with it more fog. The headlights appeared so regularly now that I stopped being surprised. I started to rely on them. On foggy nights, I'd find myself relaxing into the drive, knowing I wasn't alone. Once my car made a weird noise, a grinding sound that worried me, and I swear the car behind me slowed down even more, as if ready to stop if I needed help. I made it home fine, but that gesture of readiness stayed with me. I started leaving work at the same time, even on clear nights, just in case. Sometimes I'd see a dark sedan a few cars back and my heart would leap, but it would turn off on a different street and I'd realize it wasn't him. I learned to recognize his specific headlights, the particular way his car moved through traffic. I was learning him without ever having spoken a word. It was mid-December, 2 days before the winter solstice, when everything changed. The fog that night was the thickest yet, the kind that makes you question whether you should be driving at all. I'd stayed late finishing year-end reports, and when I left the office just after 8, the world had transformed into something otherworldly. The headlights appeared right on schedule, but this time, something felt different, charged, like the air before a thunderstorm. We were about 4 blocks from my apartment when my car suddenly lurched. A tire had blown, the sound impossibly loud in the muffled quiet of the fog. I managed to pull over to the curb, my hands shaking as I put the car in park. I sat there for a moment, trying to remember the last time I'd changed a tire, trying to remember if I even had a spare. Behind me, the sedan pulled over too. The driver's door opened, and through my rearview mirror, I watched him get out. He was tall, wearing a dark coat, and he moved with purpose toward my car. Every instinct I'd developed about stranger danger screamed at me, but a deeper instinct, one I was just learning to trust, told me I was safe. He tapped on my window. I rolled it down. His voice was deeper than I'd imagined, warm and a little rough around the edges. "You okay?" he asked. "I saw your tire blow." Up close, he was even more striking than I'd realized at the stoplight. Sharp cheekbones, a slight stubble, and those eyes that seemed to look right through all my carefully constructed walls. I found my voice, though it came out shakier than I wanted. "Yeah, I'm okay, just a flat. I should probably call roadside assistance." "I can change it for you," he said, "if you want. I've got a jack in my car." I should have said no. I should have insisted on calling for help. But instead, I heard myself say, "That would be really helpful. Thank you." He smiled then, just a small quirk of his lips, but it transformed his entire face. "I'm Dashel," he said, "though most people call me Dash." "I'm Connor," I managed. He nodded like he already knew, like he'd been carrying my name around with him for weeks. "Nice to finally meet you properly, Connor. Pop your trunk and let's get you back on the road." We worked together in the fog, him doing most of the actual work while I held the flashlight from my phone and tried not to stare at him too obviously. His hands were confident and capable, and he talked while he worked, filling the strange intimacy of the moment with easy conversation. "I know this probably seems weird," he said, loosening the lug nuts. "Me following you home all these weeks." My heart stopped. You know that I know?" He glanced up at me, and there was something vulnerable in his expression. "I figured you'd notice. I wasn't exactly being subtle. I kept meaning to stop, but then I'd see you leaving the office and I'd think, just one more time. Just make sure he gets home safe one more time." "Why?" The question came out as barely a whisper. He was quiet for a moment, focusing on jacking up the car. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. I saw you one night about 3 months ago. You were sitting in your car in the parking garage, and you were crying. Not like dramatic crying, just these quiet tears running down your face while you stared at nothing. And something about it just broke my heart. You looked so alone. So I started paying attention. I work in the building across from yours. And I started noticing when you'd leave. You always left late, always alone, and you had this look on your face like you were carrying the weight of the world. The first foggy night, I saw you leaving and I just followed on impulse. I told myself I'd make sure you got home safe and that would be it. But then I couldn't stop. I needed to know you made it home. I needed to make sure you were okay. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot against my cold cheeks. I thought I was going crazy. I thought maybe I was making it all mean something when it didn't mean anything at all. He looked up at me fully then, setting down the wrench. It meant something, Connor. It meant I spent 3 months being too scared to actually talk to you, but not scared enough to stop caring whether you made it home safely. It meant I've been driving 20 minutes out of my way every foggy night because the idea of you driving alone through it made my chest hurt. It meant I've been falling for someone I'd never spoken to, which is probably the most ridiculous thing I've ever admitted out loud. I laughed, this broken, wet sound. I came out to my therapist because of you, because you made me remember what it felt like to want something, to want someone. He stood up then, moving closer to me. We were inches apart, the fog wrapping around us like we were the only 2 people in the world. And do you? He asked quietly. Want someone? I nodded, not trusting my voice. I'm going to kiss you now, he said. If that's okay. Please, I whispered. His lips were warm against mine, gentle and questioning and perfect. He tasted like coffee and something sweet, and when his hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing away my tears, I felt something inside me that had been locked tight for years finally open. The kiss was brief, just a soft press of lips, but it felt like a promise, like the beginning of something real. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I should finish changing your tire, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Yeah, I agreed, but neither of us moved for a long moment. He finished the job quickly after that, refusing my offer to pay him, refusing anything except my phone number. We stood by our cars, neither wanting to leave, until finally he said, I should let you get inside. It's cold. Will I see you again? I asked, hating how uncertain I sounded. He smiled, full and genuine. Connor, I've been following you home for 2 months. I'm not about to disappear now. How about dinner? Tomorrow night? Somewhere with less fog and more conversation? I nodded, grinning like an idiot. I'd really like that. Me too, he said, then softer. Drive safe, okay? I'll be right behind you. And he was. I drove the last 4 blocks to my apartment with his headlights in my rearview mirror, but this time everything was different. When I pulled into my driveway, he didn't just flash his lights and leave. He pulled in beside me, got out of his car, and walked me to my building's entrance. He kissed me again under the weak yellow streetlight, longer this time, deeper, his hands in my hair, and my heart racing so fast I thought I might faint from the joy of it. Tomorrow, he promised against my lips. Tomorrow, I agreed. I watched him drive away, but this time I knew he'd be back. This time, the goodbye was just the space between one hello and the next. That was 8 months ago. Dashiell and I have been together ever since, and I've learned so much about him. I've learned that he's a physical therapist who works with pediatric patients, that he volunteers at a youth center on weekends, that he makes terrible puns and excellent pasta. I've learned that he saw me crying in my car that night because he'd been going through his own struggles with anxiety and recognized the look of someone barely holding it together. I've learned that his following me wasn't creepy or stalking, but the act of someone who understood loneliness intimately and couldn't bear to see someone else drowning in it. We still joke about it sometimes. How we fell in love through fog and headlights before we ever spoke a word. How he courted me by making sure I got home safely, by bearing witness to my existence in a way that no one else had. How I fell for a stranger who saw me at my lowest and decided I was worth caring about anyway. I'm different now, lighter. I came out to my parents, to my coworkers, to everyone who matters. I joined a queer book club. I started rock climbing with Dash on weekends. I'm learning what it means to take up space in the world as my full self, not the half version I'd been performing for so long. And sometimes, on foggy nights, Dash will drive behind me on the way home from wherever we've been. He'll keep that same careful distance, and when we reach our apartment, the one we moved into together last month, he'll flash his lights once before pulling into his parking spot next to mine. It's become our private joke, our callback to how we began. A reminder that love can find you in the strangest ways, in the fog and the fear, and the moments when you least expect it. All you have to do is be brave enough to let yourself be seen. Total_char_count 24,487.